This is Alex Smith, member of LANDS, presenting this edition of our weekly updates. For more updates and party content, visit jalands.org. That's jalands.org. Or follow us on social media. Our Twitter handle is @lands_JA, @LANDS_JA. This week, we'll be covering the National Water Commission's public-private partnership plans and a retrospective look at the government's response to COVID-19 over the past year. At the end of last week, Senator Aubenhill reiterated the oft-stated position that to stay solvent, the National Water Commission, NWC, requires a public-private partnership. That is, to cover its $3.5 billion deficit, it must be invested in privately, not just funded with taxes. Specifically, as Minister without portfolio in the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, Senator Hill called for opening the NWC up to the Jamaica Stock Exchange. When opposition foreign affairs spokesperson Lisa Hanna asked who would own shares, the senator conceded that such a large investment might require foreign companies as well as Jamaican ones. We at LANDS generally oppose government plans to privatize public utilities like water. We do so on 4 grounds. 1. Water bills, already expensive and haphazard for most customers, would explicitly be set for the NWC to make profit. 2. To seek such profit, the NWC could stop serving areas deemed too costly. 3. In the case of the NWC breaking up into or contracting services from multiple companies, servicing and switching connections would become more burdensome. And 4. Regular customers who cannot invest would have less power to engage with the NWC as shareholders owned more and more of it. Remember, water isn't just any commodity. It is essential for life, health, industry, and sanitation, the last especially important as the COVID-19 pandemic remains. Increased talk of seeking public-private partnerships suggests that wholesale privatization is the course this JLP government is setting for the NWC. However, the rhetoric is particularly suggestive since the NWC seems to already be in that kind of partnership. The National Water Commission, on its face, is a state-owned and state-run entity doing the public service and managing national water supply as a public utility. However, for the past 5 years, the NWC has already engaged private companies. The NWC has been in a 6-year contract with Mia Water, set to expire this year. The Spanish-based, formerly Israeli, water efficiency consulting firm is in partnership with the NWC to reduce non-revenue water, or NRW losses, and train engineers operating in the corporate area. In reducing NRW losses, the NWC seeks to 1. Increase water efficiency, and 2. Spur regularization of informal, so-called illegal water lines. While both are important to pursue, doing so in practice has come with unpredictable, lengthy cutoffs and inexplicable water bills throughout the years. Last December, the scope of MIA's operations in Jamaica expanded to Portmore, so the company's here to stay. Meanwhile, to keep its own pan-European investors profiting, MIA has also initiated projects in Angola, the Bahamas, Botswana, Brazil, the Philippines, and Portugal. The contracts involved are paid over their lifetime with both fixed and performance-based fees. From all this, it's clear that the NWC already is in public-private partnerships. The government of Jamaica is simply looking to expand the role of the private sector. That Senator Hill was not forthcoming with this is suspect. For years, reporting on the matter from the Gleaner to the Observer to the Jamaica Information Service failed to address MIA's crucial role in shaping the NWC's corporate policy as a private partner. MIA, this foreign company, is particularly important to pay attention to given the international dimension of this issue. It's entirely possible, at least with a private water company, for MIA or some other firm with more capital and less accountability to buy up our rights to water. If things become dire, our water resources could be bought outright as the global commodity it is. Climate change has transformed water into something investors speculate the price of. Greater public-private partnerships, especially involving the stock exchange, increasingly expose us to this state of affairs, and so we must put a check on any attempts to do so. Establishing where we stand now, as of the 12th of March 2021, Jamaica has 29,387 confirmed cases of COVID-19, with 480 deaths attributable to it. 14,912 patients have recovered, leaving 13,995 active cases remaining. Unfortunately, 1 year in, Jamaica is nowhere close to being out of the woods yet. Vaccines have started to be distributed this week, but at a time of record-breaking pace of infection, the most in one day being 878 cases on the 8th of March alone. This anniversary peak is the highest and most dramatic by far, and it comes at the end of a period of sustained active case growth since the new year. In response to the initial rise in cases, the government placed a work-from-home order from March to May 2020. That particular order was clearly necessary, as the most notable case of non-compliance came in the form of 227 positive cases, all connected to a call center in Portmore, Alorica. While not all workplaces were equally capable of transitioning work to home, the policy, in combination with others, was possibly effective in slowing down the spread of COVID-19. After Alorica closed, active cases gradually decreased from a peak of 422 on the 4th of May to a low of 80 on the 18th of July. Schools and universities also closed in the spring of 2020. Lack of internet and device access and the prospect of taking PEP and CAPE CSEC exams were the most pressing issues for students. Responding to these pressures, the Ministry of Education facilitated phased reopening of schools for the 2020-2021 academic year. Apart from select communities across the island, the government implemented parish-wide lockdowns in St. Catherine in reaction to the Alorica cluster in April, and St. Thomas and Clarendon in August. The first in St. Catherine Parish was initially stringent, restricting entry and exit and reducing shopping days, with exceptions for priority groups like elderly persons. However, by the end of it, shopping days had to be extended to prevent overcrowding, particularly in Portmore. St. Thomas's lockdown consisted of longer curfews and funeral, wedding, and entertainment restrictions. Despite a rise in active cases correlated with nomination day and election campaigning in late August and early September 2020, the government did not consider a nationwide lockdown in September. Finally, onto vaccines. Days and weeks after other Caribbean states, and months after several Western countries, some whom produce or license COVID-19 vaccines, Jamaica's first shipment of 50,000 AstraZeneca vaccines arrived as a gift from the Republic of India on the 8th of March. The interim plan from the Ministry of Health and Wellness is to immunize the following groups in the first phase by June of 2021. Government officials, healthcare workers, persons 60 years and older, security forces in the JCF and JDF, the Jamaica Fire Brigade, Passport Immigration and Customs Agency workers, and institutionalized persons, including those in correctional facilities. The second phase, set to start in May and targeted to be complete by October 2021, covers all other public sector personnel, plus the following private sector industries: hotels, transportation, manufacturing, banking, and agriculture. The third phase is for the general public. If all goes according to the interim plan, those not in priority groups can get vaccines starting in August. The overall goal is to immunize at least 65% of the population by the 31st of March 2022. Of the roughly 4 million doses planned to be used, 2.5 million are to be distributed publicly, and 1.5 million are projected to come from the private sector. Nearly two-thirds of the public stock come from COVAX, the UN-led program to ensure global access to COVID-19 vaccines, or the Africa Medical Supply Platform of the African Union. The bulk of vials, over 3.5 million, are expected to come from AstraZeneca, just like our initial shipment. The rest are a mix of Johnson & Johnson and Moderna vaccines. The single largest form of relief came from the Ministry of Finance's We Care program, providing mostly one-time cash grants to applicants without formal employment, applicants who lost employment due to the pandemic, tourism and craft workers, independent workers like taxi drivers, vendors, and hairdressers, farmers and fishers, and other qualifying businesses. We Care also augmented grants for PATH recipients and automatically deferred student loan debt. Apart from the general coverage of We Care, the Ministry of Education accelerated its tablet distribution effort during the pandemic, and the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries provided grants to qualifying fisherfolk and select investments in agriculture. For the 2021 to 2022 fiscal year, the government announced in February 2021 a $60 billion social economic recovery and vaccine program, known as SERVE for short. The bulk of the SERVE program's funding is for vaccine distribution and infrastructure projects, but there are $5 billion for businesses impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, and an additional $8.1 billion in welfare spending. Enforcement is arguably the flank of the government's policies with the most visible problems. Most COVID-19 enforcement came in the form of dispersals and detentions under the Disaster Risk Management Act, DRMA. In retrospect, Minister of Health Dr. Christopher Thompson saw this strategy as necessary for a free-for-all and so defends the police. High-profile incidents of celebrities hosting parties in violation of the DRMA were often responded to with arrests, but a common theme throughout the year was that of persons, Jamaicans and tourists alike, from affluent areas or backgrounds, receiving lesser punishment for the same violations as, or worse than, the majority of the nation. Fatigue and frustration with life during this pandemic, lack of confidence in medical and epidemiological authorities, and resistance to this heavy-handed approach all culminated this year into small, isolated protests of pandemic countermeasures like mask wearing and mass vaccination, like the most recent taking place on the 10th of March, led by Lloyd Daguilar. Signing out, this has been Alex Smith of Lance with the Weekly Update. Thanks for listening.